All right. Hey guys. Hello, hello. All right. Hope everyone has had a great week so far and a very good Thursday. All right. I'm going to go ahead and get started. So, tonight I announced that I was going to be covering the topic of people pleasing and how to create healthier boundaries, how to set healthier boundaries in pretty much every aspect of our life. Okay. So, I'm going to be covering that topic today because this is something that what I find is that a lot of adults, we don't really want to admit when we're people pleasing, because what I hear is that, a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm too grown." We don't. I'm not people pleasing. I'm too grown for that, right? But in my personal experience in working, like coaching others, when I was working in my profession as an HR leader, I worked with a lot of leaders. Even personally, like there were things that even I identified about myself that I was doing just in people pleasing. And some of us, when we identify people pleasers, sometimes you may hear it referred to as maybe the disease to please. You may hear it as the need to please, peacekeepers, or you may even hear it as some people may refer it to as them just being somebody who always goes with the flow. How many of us know that person, right? They're like, oh, yeah, I just go with the flow. I just go with the flow, right? Now, while all of that is great, even being a peacekeeper, right? Because I believe in keeping the peace, y'all. Okay. I believe in keeping the peace as much as possible. But there are levels to it. Okay. There are levels to it. Especially when the people pleasing shows up in a way where it's contradicting how we really feel and what we're really thinking. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. How many of us, and I want you to share this with me, okay? Because I know I'm not by myself on this. How many of us have been in a position where maybe you agreed to, let's say, attend an event, and that event, maybe you really didn't want to do it. You did not want to do it, but you was like, let me go anyway. I'm just going to show up. I'm going to show my face, right? And you weren't feeling it. How many of us, maybe let's say we've been in a relationship, maybe you've been in a relationship, or it could be a friendship, right? Maybe you've been in a friendship with someone, and for whatever reason, they said something to offend you. And maybe you didn't necessarily step up to say that you were offended by what they said. I'm speaking to this because from personal experience, and I would say this was me, especially in my 20s. Okay. I am well past 20 now, but I would say this was definitely something for me in my 20s. But again, the reality is a lot of us grown folks, okay? A lot of us grown folks, we do some of the same things. I see it in the workplace all the time. I see people do this all the time, right? Where maybe you were offended. Maybe some people, you over apologize. Maybe you decide that it's you're not able to attend an event, and you feel so bad about it. You feel guilty about saying no, and so you find yourself apologizing all the time. I know I'm not the only one, because that used to be me. That used to be me, feeling bad about it, feeling guilty about it. And in full transparency, I would be the one where I thought that I was giving grace, where, let's say, if someone said something and it offended me, my definition was, I give people grace, right? I'm gonna give you grace to say what you gotta say, but if you say it again, we're gonna have a problem, right? Versus just nipping it in the bud, at the time it happened, right? Like, I was guilty for that, and it was really to keep the peace in a lot of situations. And so what I had to learn later was, and I had to learn it the hard way, because I was the type of person where I would just blow up. Like, instead of just just letting that person know, hey, I'm offended by what you said, I would just blow up instead. I would just go off, and they would be like, well, what happened? Like, what button did I push, and I didn't even know, right? And so that's what we want to try to avoid. But just to say, that is a sign of people pleasing. Okay, whether we want to admit it or not, those are ways that we are people pleasing. We're trying to keep the peace. We're trying to avoid rejection. We're trying to avoid any type of conflict or anything of that nature. And oftentimes, what's happening is that we're neglecting our own self. We're neglecting our own well being in that process. So throughout the process of writing my book, so I have a book. It is now out in pre-sales, and the name of my book is Boss Moms Move Differently. It's a guide to help high achieving moms redefine motherhood, reprioritize their well-being, and reinvent their lives. So in the process of me writing this book, and you can find the book, just by the way, for those of you, if you're new, you can find my book by visiting bmmdbook.com. And so that's pretty much where I'm talking from, for the purposes of tonight. But in the process of writing this book, I was talking about setting boundaries, right? And I have a chapter in there where I'm talking about setting clear boundaries and honoring yourself, putting yourself first, especially as moms, because we often do not do that. And it's just subconsciously, we've just been trained to do that. And during that process, one of the topics that I talk about is people pleasing. And so when I started researching people pleasing, for me on the surface, when I started thinking about people pleasing, I'm like, oh, this is just it's a way of, you want to make everybody happy, right? You want to make sure everybody's at peace, everybody's happy, everybody's safe, everybody's good, right? But when you really start peeling back the layers around people pleasing, what you'll find in a lot of situations that is that when we are people pleasing, oftentimes it's exhausting. Okay, it's causing a lot of burnout for some of us. It's causing a lot of overwhelm for some of us, and we don't even know it, and we don't even recognize the fact that we are people pleasing. Okay, that is a form of self-care. Like when we can begin setting boundaries for ourselves, healthy boundaries, that's a way of self-care. And so that's what my book, that's what it's all about. It's all about setting healthy boundaries, and the only way you can do that is becoming more aware of how you're showing up, how you're making decisions, right? So the topics that I'm going to go through today is, again, I'm going to take a deeper dive around people pleasing. What is that? How does it manifest in different areas of our life? So for example, personally, professionally, as a parent, like in our parenting style, like how is this showing up when we're people pleasing? We're going to talk about why people pleasing may be one of the reasons why you're exhausted, and why it's important for us to handle it now, today. And then the last thing I'm going to hit is ways to overcome people pleasing and to set healthier boundaries. All right. So let's circle back to the definition of people pleasing. So I pulled this definition from an internet source, and a people pleaser is a person who has an emotional need to please others, often at the expense of his or her own needs or desires. Okay. So, in my definition, the way I look at that, the way I define people pleasing is the practice or habit of abandoning or sabotaging our own well being at the expense of everybody else. That's the way I define it. I see it as we are abandoning ourselves. We are sabotaging our own well being because we are trying to ensure that everybody else is happy. Okay. All right. So here's the thing. When I think about people pleasing, and I'm going to be honest with you because I shared this earlier. I shared that I struggled with people pleasing, the need to please, for years, okay? Especially in my 20s. And one thing about me now, when when I am establishing relationships and when I have friendships, and even just like in my marriage, like I pay close attention to, especially when I find that someone is people pleasing, because I'll be honest with you, I can't trust you. I cannot trust if you are constantly the type of person who is people pleasing. And again, I can speak to this because I know from personal experience, right? Like, how can you truly be authentic in your relationships? Because how are you really being honest? And how do people know if you're truly being honest? Because every time they have a conversation with you, everything is good, right? Oh, I'm good, everything's fine. You may have been offended, or someone may have just said something, mistreated you in some kind of way, and you were not authentic and transparent enough to share that you were offended. And what happens is, over time, you lose your credibility with people. Okay. You lose your credibility because I'm the type, and I say this because for me, when it comes to having certain friends who are people pleasing, I'm not going to trust you to tell me whether or not I look good in that dress. I'm not. I'm not. I will not ask you. You will not be that person. I will be asking, how do I look in this dress? How does the stomach, did I get it tucked in good? Like, how does this? No, I'm not asking you, because you're going to tell me yes every single time. Right. And so I'm not going to say that I was people pleasing to that extent, But I do know some people who will do that. Some people who they always just want to give a positive response, which is great. And some people identify that as just being nice, which is fine, right? I'm not no shame in that. But again, a lot of times when we're in the habit of people pleasing, what happens is this is spilling over into other areas in your life. And so I'm going to talk about that. So, professionally, let's break this down a little bit more how people pleasing may manifest in other areas of your life. So, professionally, you know, within the a lot of the women that I coach, a lot of the women that I work with, they're high performers, high achieving women, right? And what I find is that some of us have a hard time with setting clear boundaries and drawing a line when it comes to our work, right? So let's say, for example, and it's like we want people to know that we can handle the job, right? Like we want people to know that, I'm capable of doing this. I've got it. I've always been that chick, right? I've always been that chick to hold things down. I'm the boss lady. I'm the boss woman, and so I've got it. And oftentimes we struggle with um clearly communicating our bandwidth. Like if we know that, okay, that you've been up, late hours of the night to work on a particular project, but instead of communicating with, your supervisor or your boss that, hey, my bandwidth, like I'm already up late at night as it is, right? Instead of communicating that, we just continue to push through. I was that person. I was that person. Every single thing I'm talking about here, I promise you, I can speak to it directly because at one point in time, I would take on everything. I would take on everything. And my husband would be looking at me like, what is wrong? Why do you feel that you have to do all of this? Right. And so that's one way because and let's just face it, because sometimes for us, there are other factors that may play a part in that, right? In terms of us taking on additional assignments and not really drawing a line in the sand when it comes to the tasks that we've been assigned, right? There are other factors. Some of us we may have other things going on, but specifically in the people pleasing business, some of that is a result because maybe we don't want to get a negative response from like a boss. Maybe we don't want to get a negative response from like a coworker. We don't want to be seen a certain way, right? Maybe you have your upper levels, maybe who you don't want to be judged, right? You don't want to look as if you're not, doing what you're supposed to be doing. And it plays in so many ways, right? It does. It shows up in so many different ways. um Earlier in my career, I remember I struggled to set those boundaries. Like I say, I was up working all kind of hours at night, and I would just continue to take on all kind of stuff and then wonder, why am I so tired? I'm always so tired. I'm always coming home. I have nothing to give to anybody else at home, right? Because I was literally on autopilot, going through the motions because of the fact that I was allowing everybody else's needs, to get in the place of my own needs, right? As a mother, let's talk about where people pleasing may show up. So, as a mother, sometimes what we find is how we're raising our kids may be a result of maybe we're people pleasing for other people in our life. And I'm gonna give an example, okay? Because this was me. Early on, when I first became a mom, I remember, my mother-in-law. She was a great mother. I knew she was a great mother, and I felt as if I had to do certain things a certain way to make sure she was happy. And I never said that, right? It never came out that way. I never even thought about it. But looking back, I'm like, clearly that's what was going on. There were certain things like in terms of when you really think about it, think about how you discipline your kids. For some of us, we may not in our heart, there are certain ways we know that we don't necessarily want to discipline our kids, but we feel like we have to, especially when our parents are in the room. I don't know if anybody else have seen that, but I have seen some people like literally they flip the whole script when they have a parent or some type of guardian who's in the room. Like their whole parenting style just changes, right? And that's a form of people pleasing. That's you trying to make everybody else in a room feel good about it because of the fact that you're doing it their way versus what is right for you, what is right for your parenting style. Some of us when we're parenting, the people pleasing can even come up when you have a child. You're out, you want to keep that child quiet, right? And you give them whatever they want just to stay quiet. That, now sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes it's not so good because you don't want to get in the habit of always giving a child everything they want, right? Just to keep them quiet in certain situations. So all that to say, again, it can show up in so many different aspects of our life. Friendships, when it comes to friendships, old friends, new friends, it doesn't matter. Sometimes, and especially for some of us, when we are moms, right? When we become moms, our bodies change. A lot of things about us, like a lot of the things that we like as we become older, right? Certain things about us just change. And I would say for me personally, I certain foods I didn't like, certain drinks I couldn't drink. I opened myself up to more music, different types of music and things of that nature. But honestly, there were just things with thank you, Marcus. There were so many things that just changed. And so being around certain friends, let's say that I had when I was in, high school or in my early 20s, let's face it, there are certain things I didn't feel really good about doing, right? And again, when you're kind of still in your 20s and later on in life, you still want to hold those relationships, right? So you don't want anybody to feel bad about telling them like, hey, I don't do that no more. I don't really like going to those types of places, right? Like sometimes it's hard to have those conversations, especially when you're trying to grow or when you're in a place of growth. Sometimes it's hard to have those conversations with people, especially when they're like your day ones. Those are your people who they've been your ride or die forever. And so a people pleasing trait is basically you're assuming how they're going to respond, right? You don't want to offend anybody, you don't want to hurt any feelings, right? And so what you do is that you avoid it. So you just go with the flow. You're that person who's like, I'll just go with the flow, right? But you're not really comfortable with it. That's another way people pleasing comes up. In families, sometimes you got, Auntie Tina, and I'm saying Auntie Tina. No, I don't have an Auntie Tina, but Auntie Tina, she thinks you still in your 8-year-old self, and she's talking all kind of trash and talking to you any old kind of way. And maybe you call it being respectful, right? Like you're like, oh, I'm being respectful because I'm not going to talk back. But actually, you're people pleasing because you're trying to avoid conflict in your family, right? There's a way to say it. There's a way to address that when something has been said, something has been done that you don't necessarily agree with. But again, this is how it goes. However you do one thing is likely how you do it in other areas of your life as well. From personal experience, like I say, I did everything for everybody. I felt like I was always trying to attend all the events, all the birthday parties, and I call myself a supporter. And that's what I was. I saw my mom do that, right? And I wanted to be there for everybody. And it took everything out of me. It got me to a point where my marriage was in jeopardy. Let's just call it what it is. My marriage was in jeopardy. Just my well-being. I suffered from certain physical and mental, like certain issues as well, just as a result of not being able to say no. Okay. So I was exhausted from that. So the question is, how do we get ourselves out of the people pleasing business? Okay. Whether we want to admit it or not, whether we want to admit that we are people pleasing, I promise you, in one way or another, you are likely people pleasing in some area of your life. So, how do we get out of that business? Well, let me say this. How did we get into it first? So, let's talk about how did we get into that business? The way we got into it is because a lot of us have been programmed to be people pleasers. Okay. Like, especially us as women, we have been programmed to be to people please for a very long time. At an early age, we were people pleasing, and we learned how to please in order to receive approval, right? We learned how to please in order to avoid rejection. We didn't want to offend certain people. And a lot of times, what we were doing as we became older was we were anticipating. Again, we were making certain decisions out of anticipation of a certain response, right? So, that if back, when you were younger, you had a negative response for sticking up for yourself or, expressing your opinion about something. Um, that's right. Avoidance. That's right. That's right. Love it, Donald. Love that. But yeah, the point here is that a lot of us, we were conditioned when we were, early on in life, we were conditioned to be that type of person where we made everybody happy, right? Like that's how we got, good things when we were younger, right? Like that's how we got rewarded when we would be, put on good behavior, right? That's when people would, give us rewards. That's when we would get, the candy, the money, and things like that when we gave the right response. And for a lot of us, when we were younger, if you gave the wrong response, or if you even, especially in my generation, if you challenged anything that an adult said about anything, like if you had a different opinion, you could get your head knocked off. I mean, I'm just saying, like that, that's just the way it was. Like, just speaking against, what someone may have been saying. So it is all about assertiveness, right, Donald? Um, so why is it important that we stop? Why is it important that we stop? How do we get out of this? Okay. So the first reason is because we are compromising our own well-being and it's exhausting. Okay. So the need to stop doing everything, we really need to get in a place where we stop trying to do everything for everybody because it's not possible. Okay. And I just heard my coach talk about this today because I was on an accountability call, and it was so true. And I had some of this in my notes as well, but she talked about how, especially a lot of us as Black women, because of the fact that we've been conditioned, we are so strong, we have been conditioned to hold everything down. Sometimes we feel as if we have to be the ones to keep everything together, right? Like we have to be the ones to make everybody, I want to make sure everybody good, right? And so I'm here to help you to help us, right? To help us understand that there is nothing wrong with you putting yourself first and putting your needs first, okay? Because when we're able to put ourselves first and put our needs first, that's when we're able to serve everyone else at a higher level, okay? And I know this from experience, and so that's why I'm talking about it. Another reason why it's so important for us to stop the people pleasing is it's a way, this is a way that we're modeling self-care for our children. Now I know a lot of people, we don't really, I would say this, I have a lot of conversations with other moms, with other parents, right? And you know a lot of us are thinking about how can we model parenthood in a way that's going to be positive, for our children. How can we model it in a way where we're setting good examples, right? We all want to be good examples. We all want to model, a good representation as it relates to being a parent. All of us, most of us do, right? And so this is a way when we start identifying certain characteristics, certain traits that we may have as it relates to people pleasing, we can correct that and we can model that same behavior to teach our kids that you don't have to be a people pleaser, right? We can teach them that at a young age. Um, and the last thing I kind of want to hit on in terms of why it's important that we stop is because we are keeping ourselves from living out our fullest potential when we people please a lot in a lot of situations. Again, this is not the only reason, but in a lot of cases, we're stuck. We're stuck in not fulfilling our purpose. We're stuck in not moving forward on a dream or a goal that we have because we are in the people pleasing business. We don't want to offend certain people, right? We don't want to write that book. And I'm talking personally, right? Like we hesitate to write that book or to move forward on that book because maybe there are certain stories that I don't want to bring up in that book because I'm afraid that it may offend certain people, right? And so to kind of keep the peace, I'm just going to stay quiet, right? Or maybe I don't want to show up a certain way. Some of us are stuck in not moving forward on a particular business idea, maybe because it's against your family's religion, right? Or maybe it's against the things that maybe it's against what everybody else around you has been familiar with, and so you're afraid to put yourself out there because again that people pleasing is coming up, right? And so you're thinking about what everybody else is thinking, how everybody else is going to feel about what you're doing, right? That's where that people pleasing can come up, and that's why it's important. And what I'm really passionate about, more than anything, is getting people out of that. So not only for the sake of our own well-being, but also for us really tapping into our fullest potential. Because what you'll find is that a lot of us are stuck. We are holding ourselves back off of other people, off of other opinions. Okay. So, how do we stop the habit? I'm going to talk about some ways that we stop the habit of people pleasing. So, the first one is self awareness. So this is going to be a crucial piece of it because, again, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of us don't really admit, we don't even want to admit that we have people pleasing characteristics. Because a lot of us, will say, oh, I'm grown. I don't, who am I pleasing? I'm not trying to make anybody, right? I hear that all the time. But then, when it comes to not speaking up for yourself, not setting boundaries, right? When it comes to, you're tired, you know that you need time to yourself, to maybe take half a day to just have some time to yourself, or maybe you just need to take a nap, right? But instead of you communicating that to your children, or you communicating that to your spouse, you push through it. And you know that you pushing through it is only going to make it worse because it's going to cause you to totally in a different place when even although you may be in the same room with everybody else, you're not thinking about them, right? Like you're not really engaged with the people around you because you're so exhausted, you're so tired, right? So you're doing not only yourself a disservice, but you're also doing the people around you a disservice. That is people pleasing. Okay. So I say self-awareness is important because you got to be honest with yourself. You have to be super honest with yourself and identify if any of these traits or characteristics apply to you. Because again, they can show up in so many different ways. It's not just that surface level people pleasing that I talked about where, oh, well, I'm saying no. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm saying yes when I really mean no just to keep friends, right? It's not that type of, I'm talking about how it's showing up in your job, how it's showing up in your work, how it's showing up in your business, how it's showing up in your relationships, how it's showing up in your parenting style. So it's showing up in different ways. And this is why it's so important that we do have a certain level of awareness when we are really trying to get a handle on this whole people pleasing. Um, it's likely the case that if you are people pleasing, you're likely forcing that on somebody else. Okay, so I'm going to say that again. It's likely the case that if you are going back to self-awareness, if you've identified that any of these characteristics, any of these traits apply to you, it's likely the case that you may be forcing these same people pleasing traits on other people around you. Okay, so you're expecting. So, for example, because you've done something good, right? Because you've attended, you worked all these long hours, and then you attended an event that you knew you were exhausted, you knew that you didn't have anything to give, but you showed up, right? But then when it comes back to your particular event, what happens is you end up they end up not going to your event, right? And so now you're mad with them. Now you're mad, now you're offended by the fact that they didn't come to your event but you came to theirs, right? Because you're expecting something in return as relates to people pleasing, right? Like you're anticipating that, oh, it's going to make them happy, it's going to make them excited, and hopefully they'll show up when I have something going on. That's what a lot of us, we wanted to be reciprocated in a lot of areas, but the reality is, again, if we're people pleasing, we're probably forcing it on other people around us. And I'll give another example around that. So my daughter, and I didn't learn this concept until this was like years ago when I actually learned this whole concept around people pleasing. Um, I remember when she was younger, I would be that type of mom where I would say, why don't you go play with such and such? Why don't you go and, why don't you go hang out with her? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Right? Like, you don't want to hurt her feelings, and I think it's important that we do teach our kids a certain level of social and emotional intelligence, right? Like we want them to have those skills where they can empathize with other people and things of that nature. But at the same time, again, there's a line there. There is a fine line. And we don't want to get too caught up where we're conditioning our children to say, well, I'm going to make certain decisions based on the feelings of everybody else, right? Like I can empathize with you all day, but I don't have to necessarily change what I'm doing, or I don't necessarily have to compromise my well-being or abandon my own well-being just because I want to make you happy. Right. And so for her, for the longest time, I would do that when she was younger, but I was so proud of her. This was maybe like a couple of weeks ago. One of her friends came to the house, and she went to the door, and I was shocked because like our neighborhood really close, but one of the girls came to the door and she asked my daughter if she could come out and play. And so my daughter was like, I don't really feel like playing today. And she said it in the nicest way, but she said, I don't really feel like playing today. And I was shocked. I was like, okay, girl. I was like, okay, Aubrey. And she turned around and said, why didn't you go outside? And she said, well, Mama, I wasn't really feeling like playing today. I didn't really feel. And I said, you know what? Good for you. At least you communicated that with her. You let her know, you were very clear. She felt tired that day. And she was just like, you know what? I just don't really feel like playing. And I was so proud of her because the old version of me would have been like, somebody came to play with you, like you don't want to hurt her feelings, go out and play. Like, even if it's 10, 15 minutes, right? That would have been the older version of me. But I was so proud of her because I know that she's picking up on the things that I'm doing to set those boundaries for myself, because that's exactly how I communicate now. When I have certain things, certain events where it's like, I just don't have it in me, I'm very clear about, hey, sis, I'm sorry, but this is just not the week. This is just not the weekend, right? And so this is again going back to that level of self-awareness is going to be key here, right? The next thing is self-discovery. So in my book, Boss Moms Move Differently, what I talk about, I have a whole chapter. Sorry, Instagram. I have a whole chapter for self-discovery. And so this is helping moms to come just to really reconnect with themselves, because a lot of us, again, we've changed so much and the same rules just don't apply in terms of who we were, what we thought. We've grown in so many different ways. And so it's important that in order for us to set clear boundaries, we got to know what those boundaries are. That's what self-discovery comes in. That's what really taking time to identify what ticks you off, right? What are those things that tick you off now that maybe it didn't annoy you back in the day, but yeah, I'm annoyed. I'm annoyed. I don't want to be around it right now, right? Or maybe some of us, you go to bed at a certain time, right? Like, and I know a lot of people, they shut that phone down, shut that phone off. They put on do not disturb at 9 p.m. There is no way I could do that, but I know some people, and I respect that. Right. I respect the fact that they can shut those phones off and don't call me at 9 o'clock. Right. Um, but you have to know what your boundaries are. And the only way you can know what boundaries you can set and how you can clearly communicate it is by getting crystal clear about what those boundaries are. Who are you? What do you like? Who do you like to be around? What do you enjoy doing? Right. It takes, especially for us in different areas, in different seasons of our life, it takes time, and it really takes intention to go back and reconnect with ourselves, because again, we've been running, we've been so busy doing what everybody else is doing, and meeting the demands of everybody else, that we lose ourselves, and we can lose ourselves in the process. Okay. So I'd encourage you, check out the book, because I lay all that out. I have self-discovery questions that you can reference in that book as well. The next thing is to communicate clear boundaries. Okay. I know that's right. They lock those phones down. I'm not mad. I'm not mad, Glenda. The next thing is to communicate clear boundaries, and so this is in a kind way, in an assertive way, right? So you don't have to be nasty about it. You don't have to be nasty to let someone know that you let's say on your job, like, you don't have the bandwidth. I used to work with somebody like that, where I mean, it would come off so rude. She'd be like, I'm not doing that. That's different, right? Nobody wants that kind of energy, but there is a way professionally that we can communicate that. We can communicate, hey, just the bandwidth right now, I just don't have it right now. Maybe we can revisit this in the next couple of weeks, right? It's the way we say it in a lot of ways, right? But communicating that to your significant other, communicating that to your children, right? And this is a big one, especially for me, because it really did take me having to, even though I'm exhausted, there's no need for me to like go off on everybody just because I'm exhausted. Like, just communicate what you need. And oftentimes people can respect when you can clearly communicate, hey, now is just not the time right now, right? You don't have to apologize. You don't have to say I'm sorry. You don't really have to even give an excuse, but just being very, hey, now is just not the time, right? And sometimes that is uncomfortable. And I will kind of go back to say the reason why it's so important around communication, with communicating those boundaries, because not only does it allow you to communicate those boundaries, but it also allows you, it also allows other people around you. So let's say if you have, you're communicating with your spouse around, let's say, a boundary, you're communicating on something that you just didn't like what he said, right? You didn't like the way he acted. You don't like, you had that conversation, right? It also gives him the opportunity to be able to express his as well, right? And so it's a dialogue. It's a dialogue that's happening. And that's what we want, to welcome. We want to welcome a healthy dialogue, right? Um, so another thing that I would say is, remember, you are not responsible for other people's feelings. Okay. So this is more so a reminder. We're not responsible. And I know we want to be. I know we want to be. It's the, especially women, like, it's the women side of us. It's the mother side of us, where we want to be responsible for how people feel, or how people may respond when we are communicating those boundaries. And that's not our business. It's not. It's not our business. The reality is that you may piss people off. You may, especially once you start getting in the habit and start getting in the practice of communicating that. And I would tell you, it does take work, especially if you've been doing it your entire life. but you may piss some people off. You may piss off some family members. You may piss off, people who they're expecting you to call them, certain days, or maybe they're expecting you to pick up your phone, and you know that you are just tired. You don't want to talk to anyone. That is totally okay, right? And it's okay to communicate. Hey, I'm just, I don't, I'm not really wanting to talk right now. I don't really have the energy to talk. It's okay to have those conversations. And I think sometimes the reason why I bring that up, that's an obvious answer, right? It's very obvious to say, like, hey, you're not responsible for that. People say it all the time. But I think it's a reminder more so than anything to remind you that, hey, like, we take on so much, and we want to control. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of it is a form of manipulation, right? Because we want to control how people receive us. We want to be liked. We want people to value us, and we don't want to appear as if we're being rude or that we're being, a nasty person, especially when you get around certain friends. And so that's why I say we're not responsible for other people's feelings, because at the end of the day, if they're people who gonna ride with you, if they ride with you, they will ride with you regardless, right? And so that's really what it boils down to. The next way that we can stop is to become comfortable being uncomfortable. I say this all the time. Become comfortable being uncomfortable. And what that means is, because I said it is very uncomfortable sometimes apologizing. I'm sorry, not apologizing. So setting boundaries, telling people, hey, I'm not gonna be able to make it, and not apologizing. That is the hardest thing, especially when you are not in the habit of doing that. But give yourself grace and just know that that is a part of the process. So although you may feel bad about it, although you may feel uncomfortable, it's because our brains, the way we've been trained to look at this for so long, for pretty much most of our lives, it is going to feel very uncomfortable to tell someone that, hey, I don't appreciate what you said, or no, I don't have the bandwidth to do this. And you don't have to give an excuse. You don't have to apologize about it. Okay. So I have to warn you that just because it feels uncomfortable, become comfortable being uncomfortable in that process. Okay. Give yourself grace. And this is all about self-love. So remember, when you're in the process of really prioritizing your well-being, it all comes back down to giving yourself grace, because a lot of us, because we haven't been doing this right, because we've been conditioned to do certain things for so long, even when it comes down to just prioritizing our own wellness, sometimes it feels bad. And sometimes, I'm not even gonna say sometimes, a lot of times, we feel like we're being selfish when we do those types of things. And so I have to call that out, because there is a difference between being selfish, and self-care. There is a difference. And I know a lot of people don't want to acknowledge that, but I do believe wholeheartedly that although we may feel selfish for, not attending a particular event when we know we didn't really want to attend the event, right? There is a difference, because self-care is your way of taking care of yourself, right? So that you can be able to serve others on a deeper level, right? Like, you can really take care, you can serve others, you can take care of your kids. Versus selfish is you only thinking about yourself, right? And you're doing it at the expense of everybody else. So you're only thinking about yourself, and you don't really care about the outcome. You're not really interested in the outcome of how it's going to affect other people. Meaning, let's say someone, gets hurt, or, for us, I would say, in terms of like just being a mom, you decide to do something, and you know that this is going to affect your kids in a negative way, right? That to me is selfish. Versus self-care is, your child is going to survive. If you decide that you want to lay down for 30 minutes and take a nap, or if you are sick, right? And I talk to so many moms about this. You're sick, and you feel as if you cannot lay down and have some time just to take care of yourself, so that you can recuperate and be your best, right? And so a lot of times we stay sick longer because we never took time to even rest. Your kids will be okay, right? Like, and I'm speaking more so from older kids, like kids who are more independent. But even if you have younger kids, that's where I go back in my book, and I'm talking about, you got to go ahead, you got to delegate, right? Sometimes it takes you delegating. Sometimes it takes you building a village, building a community of people who can actually help you when those situations when those situations come up, right? So just keep in mind that, again, you're going to feel selfish. It's going to feel that way, because that's the way you have been conditioned. That's the way you have been trained throughout most of your life that, a selfish mom is the type of person who will go out on a girls trip, right? You're the selfish mom. That's the narratives that I talk about in my book. I talk about, you're the selfish mom because you want to take care of yourself. No, you're promoting self-care so that you can take better care of the people around you. You can be your best self. You can be your happiest self. You're not walking around tired and exhausted all the time, right? And then one last thing I just want to mention here when we talk about people pleasing is sometimes you got to reaffirm who you really are. And I say this because um again, when we start running that narrative around just being selfish, right? Like you're thinking like, oh my God, I'm such a bad mom, right? Like we have all this negative self-talk that's going on because we decided to take care of ourselves, right? And so I want you to start getting the habit of reaffirming who you really are. Who are you? You know you're not a bad. You know that you're a good person. You know that you're a good mom. You know that you take care of the needs. Your needs are met, and you ensure that your needs are met for your children and for your family every single day. You know you're taking good care of them, right? You know that you're constantly thinking about them. You know that most of the time we go to sleep, we're thinking about, what the kids have going on. Did we ensure that their homework was completed? Did we ensure that we ordered groceries for the week, right? Like all of these things. So you know that you are doing the right thing. But again, your brain is going to try to tell you that you're being selfish because it's all based on certain narratives, right? And so those are the things that I would say that those are the tools and those are the ways that I would encourage you to start breaking the habit of people pleasing. So my call to action to you, I want you to start thinking about, and this is, beyond this call, and feel free, you can always go back and check out the replay of this. But if you have been the person where, you've gotten in the habit of people pleasing, whether you want to admit it or not, right? Um, if you have certain people pleasing traits or characteristics, I would encourage you to really take some time to be honest with yourself. You don't have to, journal about it. I tell people journal. I love putting things pen to paper, but take some time to journal about, what are some ways that people pleasing may be coming up in your life, right? And you have to ask yourself, like, is it really working for you? Is it really, does it feel right for you? So like when you've made certain decisions around attending certain things, or maybe allowing yourself to just be so stretched, why? List out those things. Why do you feel so stressed? Why do you feel so overwhelmed in your job? Why do you feel so overwhelmed in your business? Are there certain things that maybe you can delegate? Are there certain things that maybe you just need to communicate? You need to clearly communicate with the people in your life that, maybe you're not comfortable, or maybe you would prefer for certain things to be done a certain way, right? Maybe a different way to help you, or maybe to help everybody else. Sometimes that's what it takes. And I want you to start thinking about that, journal about it, because what you may find is that there may be certain areas of your life, personally, professionally, where people pleasing is burning you out. People pleasing may be keeping you exhausted. People pleasing may be limiting you from really taking advantage of certain opportunities because you're afraid of what people are going to say. You're afraid of how people are going, what they're going to think about you, right? I want you to think about those things and write those things down. And I would also encourage you to join the Wine and Mastermind community. So if you look us up on Facebook, we're on a Facebook group, and these are things that we talk about. So we talk about the people pleasing. We talk about how can we get out of that? How can we get out of our head, and what's causing us to not take action on things that we know we need to be doing, right? I know that's right. Delegation. Yes. Yes. But think about that. But also join a community, even if it's not Wine and Mastermind. Join a group of people. Join a community. Get an accountability partner, somebody that you can talk to really check you and say, "Hey, is this? Am I people pleasing? Like, am I not really setting boundaries here? Because something is just not in alignment. Something is just not right." And make sure have somebody to keep it real with you, who will tell you the truth. And be honest with yourself, right? I want you to be honest with yourself. And then lastly, I want you to check out my book. Check out my book. You can visit BMMD, B as in boy, MMD as in dog, book.com to check out my book, Boss Moms Move Differently. This is a guide to help high performing women, high performing mothers redefine motherhood, reprioritize their well being, and reinvent their lives. So I want you to check it out because I am sharing so much more here around just setting healthy boundaries. But I just felt led today to talk more in detail about the people pleasing because, again, what I saw was that, on the surface, it really, once you start peeling back the layers and start really talking about people pleasing and how it's showing up in your life, a lot of us are being affected by it, and a lot of us are making decisions. That are really not in our favor, and it's causing us to be overwhelmed and tired. Okay, so I want you to check it out, and I thank you all so much. Those of you who are on Instagram, so much for joining. Those of you who are on Facebook, thank you so much. I appreciate you all. I appreciate your support. And if you know anyone who may benefit from this book, Boss Moms Move Differently, I want you to let them know about it. I want you to, matter of fact, tag them in the comments, let them know. Or you can send them a link, bmmdbook.com. And I'll also make sure that I put it here in the comments so that you can share it. But I want to help as many moms, as many women as I can, because y'all, we do so much, we carry so much. And here's the thing, a lot of us, we have a desire to become more and to have more, but we don't really know how to get started. And some of us don't even really feel like it's possible because of the fact that we have children, because of the fact that we're raising a family. But I am here to help support that. And so if you know anybody who may be interested, please share it with them. And also, for those of you, if you want to work closer with me, feel free to hit me up on DM. I am promoting a special right now, but it is more of an exclusive special. So if you want to work more with me, I do have some coaching that I'm providing as well. So make sure that you hit me up, DM me, and let me know. Or if you know someone who may benefit from it. All right. So I think I've held you all. Yep, it's about 45 minutes. So thank you all so much for joining, and I will see you all next week. As a matter of fact, let me just share this. Next week, I'm going to have a guest speaker. Her name is Jennifer Dove, and she's an author as well, but she's an authenticity coach. She's amazing, and she and I we're going to talk a little bit more about people pleasing, but we're also going to take a deeper dive around just authenticity and just building healthier relationships. So I want you to tune in. That's going to be next Thursday at 8:30 as well. But y'all will catch me probably throughout the week. I'll probably be dropping some live. So hopefully everybody, I hope you all have a great night, and I will see you guys next time.